Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to another podcast of C&E. I'm David Caduto, and let's go around the room and introduce ourselves.
I'm Aaron Lanuza.
And I'm Shelby Stewart.
And this week, we are actually starting the genres that I made mention of. However, we're actually not going to do the faith-based ones because Easter has come and gone. And there is another movie coming out next week called Hardcore Henry, which actually is, at first I thought it was a video game. So because it was shot in such a first-person style.
It looks like a video game.
And it looks like a video game, and it sounds like a video game, but it's not a video game. But we're still doing video game genres, or video game movies. So all of these movies we're going to discuss today have been video games that have been turned into movies.
Yes.
So one of the very first movies that I can remember coming out was Tron, way back in 1982 with Jeff Bridges. But
Jeff Bridges, the same guy who was in the newer Tron, too.
Right.
Yes.
And he actually won an Oscar for Crazy Heart back in 2010, if you can believe that, and was just in Steve Jobs this last year. But, yeah, so let me just ask you guys, why don't you start, Aaron? What was the very first, well, let me ask you this basic question first. Did you play video games growing up?
Slightly. I remember my dad was actually really big on the Nintendo 64.
Okay.
And, well, you know what? It could have been the early Nintendo. So
okay, the NES, the gray, for all those that don't know and that have been aged, they are it's a little gray box, and if you have them, it's still a collectible today. And there's a whole big story behind that, so go on.
Anyways, he did have the gray box.
Yes.
But he had so many games. One of them was Tetris, and the other one was where all the what is it? The Mario Brothers.
Yes, the Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, he would play that all the time.
So,
Yes.
a little quick history lesson. Once upon a time in 1983, there was a video game crash. And the crash happened because Atari, which was a big component back in the day, wanted to try and put a game out. You guys remember E.T., which is a classic, of course.
Yes, yes.
So
Yes.
Atari basically forwarded $500,000 to the designers and the producers of the Ataris, and they were going to make this into a game. And so, well, they only had about 6 weeks to produce, design, construct, and get all the bugs out of the game. And so, long story short, it failed horribly. And so what ends up happening is not only does the system go down, but now, and you can actually Google this if you want it, there are ET cartridges in landfills. And if you have one of these, it's a gem because they're worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Getting back to the Atari, or the Nintendo Entertainment System, what they did was Nintendo was big in Japan. So what ended up happening was they had this little gray chip, and this was to control QC, or quality control. So basically, they could test, design, produce, and do all of this with one little chip in it. So when it came over to America, when you had Mario, and you had Duck Hunt, you had Tetris, and you had all these, there was no problem with it. Subsequently, it took off, and what you have now is Nintendo being one of the top 3 or 4 video game designers in the world. And
so that's how it got so big.
That's how it got so big, because everybody was tired of having it crash. Now, what they say about having you blow into the cartridges, trust me, it's not good. I had a friend
Really?
who,
I remember doing that like a harmonica.
Because they said don't do that, because you take a little wet rag or whatever and do that, because that's the only way it could really get cleaned.
Yeah.
So anyways.
Can I also say something? You're talking about the E.T. game that came out.
Yeah.
They ended up going back into those landfills, or to the landfill where they had thrown millions of cartridges.
Yes.
They went back and they calculated to find out where that specific spot was that they had put it in years
so
before.
So they could try and get it back.
So that they could find it, and they found the games.
Really?
They found a majority of the games there.
Wow, that's shocking. No, so that's a little history lesson about Nintendo.
Wow.
So Nintendo was your very first.
Yeah, it was my dad's, and I remember playing right behind him.
Yeah. So Mario was your favorite game?
Mario was my favorite game, but Mortal Kombat was my favorite movie
Oh.
adaptation of a video game.
Yeah,
Since I
that's-
was a kid.
Yeah.
And that's what I grew up with, Mortal
Okay.
Kombat.
That was actually, and then Sega came along about 10 years later and actually did that. So
Oh,
Shelby.
yep.
Yes.
So what about you? What was your first, so do you play video games?
Not really.
Okay.
But I'm with Aaron on this one. My dad had, the Nintendo, the gray box,
Okay.
and we would
Huh.
plug it, and Super Mario was the one we would play a lot.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
So
That's the one I remember playing. I'm sure there was many others, but when I was a kid, I actually played more video games on the computer.
Right.
And I did way more video gaming when I was a kid than I.
Just shoot, and K was for shoot, and it was just,
See, I wish we could go back to the simple video games because they are far too complex
Well,
for me
yeah.
now. Like, I can't figure out how to
Well,
go
Let's go
forward.
backtrack a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah, I go out, I've played Halo before. I just stand in the corner.
Oh
and I'm
my
like,
gosh,
I don't know what to do on this thing.
Okay, so
That was a
we
great
digress.
game. That was a
but,
good game. Yeah.
So ever since the 1980s, basically, there have been video game movies. There have been good, there have been bad, and there have been different.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said before, 1982, Tron was the very first one to come out.
Yeah.
And then a couple years later, actually it was about 10 years later, you had, as you guys made mention, Super Mario with Bob Hoskins, and they figured, okay, we're going to not only capitalize on the gaming world, but we'll try and put it in a feature film, and that did horribly. And so it only got a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
And as you could tell, it just wasn't,
Yeah.
As a kid though, growing up and watching that movie, it was very fun. As a kid, you don't really content the content. You just,
right.
You
No,
just
absolutely.
enjoy what
no,
you
you're
have.
just enjoying the movie.
It is good.
So after Super Mario, and we're not going to go through all of them today, but there have been some that, have been major ones. What you were talking about, Mortal Kombat.
Mm-hmm.
I remember back watching with Christopher Lambert. So, but fast forward, and really as the video games have gotten better over the years, the movies have gotten better over the years.
Yeah.
I can remember even watching Laura Croft. I remember when Angelina Jolie got
Yeah.
announced as
Oh my
Laura
gosh.
Croft, and everybody's like, wow, how is she going to be able to transform? She did a fairly good
Yeah.
job, and, you go all the way down the list here. Doom in 2005
Yeah.
with The Rock, who was trying to make his bones in Hollywood.
Which was like very corny.
It
To
was
say
very
the least.
corny. The effects were just like,
Yeah.
ooh.
But the
okay.
video game, whole different story.
Oh, well, see,
The video game is completely
but see,
different. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
That's funny you bring that up because Doom was one of the before Doom came out in 2003, I want to say. Doom, there had never been, Mortal Kombat actually was the first. Mortal Kombat started something with video games that really hadn't been done before.
What's that?
And that was blood and violence and gore. And anybody who's played the original knows exactly what I'm talking about with the fatalities. And so back 20, 25 years ago, they said, oh, we have to do something about this. So the government regulated this. And as you know now, when you see that little commercial, let's say for the Division, and you see TVM, okay, that is all, it's what's called the ESRB, the Electronic Safety Rating Board. And I've actually gone through and looked at it, and it's fascinating. It's like the ratings for movies. And so they had to then create this and do this, and then since that one game, that's all you've really seen. Nobody really wants a PG game anymore unless it's for
No.
kids.
Yeah.
You've had, Resident Evil, you've had Doom, you've had all of these games that has just been, because let's face it, video games it's a $6 billion industry. And so they try and capitalize on that.
They're getting so elaborate just the way they look
and
nowadays.
you're right,
You have
Silent
to have
Hill
a
and,
movie to respond to it.
Dead and Alive, and all of these games that just, Max Payne. Now there's one, So the point is that as the video games have been more violent and everything else, they figure, okay, let's capitalize on this. And this is one of those genres and that's why I wanted to talk about it today, because it's not one of those genres that you say, okay, well, as far as Hollywood's concerned, what do you guys think? Do you think because we have more coming out later on this year.
Yes.
Do you think they need more? or is it just stuff to fill up the slots?
I think it's really important that we start going into this direction, because now that technology is booming, we have these video games that are becoming more 3D-esque and more lifelike than we had before. So for us to finally come out with movies that respond to those video games, I think that's just the way to go, especially because we want to put a face to those games, and it's opening another market for people. Like you see Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy is a big market in the video game industry, and then now that we have Final Fantasy, there's just so many aspects of it that you can start to delve into now. People love the way that their video game series films sound and look, but to be able to go further than that and actually turn it into a real movie, that's whenever they still have their fans attached, and they can keep going and have an instant success that way.
So do you guys play video games? I guess here's the question. Do you guys play video games? I know you said you don't play video games as much. Like once a week? Or once when you can? Or is it just recreational?
I was telling you all earlier, the only video game I play is The Sims.
Yes. Yes.
Don't know if I should even say that. It's kind of embarrassing. But
it's not so embarrassing.
No, it's not.
But it's easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I know how to move the buttons, and I can figure it out. But what you were saying, Aaron, is like, I completely agree with how the genre needs to kind of, I mean, if you see, there's, 4 movies coming out for the rest of this year based on video games? That is, I mean, that itself kind of speaks for itself.
Well, I think that
this is a booming market?
This is a bigger market, and I mean, we've gone over this so many times, but there's no, like, you kind of have to start drawing from somewhere else, because you can only make so many sequels and trilogies and things like that. You kind of need to start pulling from something else. And what better to pull from than something that's loved by people already and already has a built-in fan base?
Yeah,
exactly.
I think, and you're right about that, and I think Resident Evil is a perfect example of that.
Yes.
I mean, we have another one coming out in 2017.
How many can they make?
This is the 6th one.
It's actually called the final chapter.
You know, and so hopefully this is the final chapter.
I hope so. I think they're all pretty much realize, like, this is all for fun now. We're not doing it for seriousness.
Yes. But I mean, it also, like you said, it gives a face to the characters. I mean, what's her name? Mila?
Yeah, Mila Jovovich.
She's been in every one.
Yes,
like, that is the face of it.
Of Resident Evil?
Funny
because she is the face, but she's also really not, because in the video game they just turned her into her own character, representing it in a different franchise, having nothing to do with the video game.
But that's also the difference. When you are doing like so different from video games to movies, you can do that. You can kind of pick out certain characters and focus on them more than others, because it's like, okay, they sit here and they play the video game. What can differ from that? Like, what can we do different but still keep it in the same fluidity, universe. I guess? Universe,
Kind of like a reboot.
Exactly.
Except in the movie business.
Yes.
Well, I think the other thing, too, is, and you guys will agree with me on this, Hollywood is full of fads.
I agree.
Yes.
And so the fact is, and I was saying this last week, too, when you have something that's successful and you see somebody else that's successful, you want to try and duplicate, copy, and replicate that as much as possible.
Yes.
So,
or like how they like to call it zeitgeist.
Exactly.
The zeitgeist.
So,
yes.
you know, I mean, and it's not a bad thing, it's just you're doing it. And this is the same premise, that you're having all of these movies come out, and I'm looking at this now, and you have at least 6 within the next 2 years. You know, we have I can't even believe I'm going to say this. We have an Angry Birds movie coming out. Like, really? I remember a few years ago when the app was just coming out, and somebody would say something, and now it's huge.
Yes.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's huge.
It's huge.
We have...
Kids love it,
too.
The
kids, that's the thing. That's the thing.
To get more...
it's very popular.
The kids love it.
Yeah.
And
there's candy.
Exactly. The marketing on this
different color birds.
Absolutely.
It's easy
huge.
Though.
You have Star Wars Angry Birds.
Yes.
You have Indiana Jones Angry Birds. I mean, and
holiday Christmas Angry Birds.
So I mean, this is just something that is just like wow. You know, and the funny thing is, I've never played the game. It doesn't appeal to me, but I just seeing
After
that.
the first level, it will.
Yeah. So on the flip side of that coin, the month after that, we have something which is another big game online, and that's Warcraft. And
which is going to be big for
That's gonna be
for that
to be
community.
huge.
Yeah.
And this is something that everybody that plays online, that they know what I'm talking about, because this is like it is the game right now.
No.
And
it has been for what, 6 years?
Yeah,
7 years
I'd say
now?
exactly around 7 years.
It's kind of like its own hidden community.
Right.
I had a neighbor who ended up just him and his dad, and his dad and his brother. They all had different computers around the house, and they would play Warcraft together. I remember he got to level 70, and he told me they're coming out with more levels. And I remember him getting so excited about that, just knowing that.
Well,
oh my
I'm just
God,
thinking
that they could sell their characters. What they could do with them.
Well, and that's the thing too. It's a good point, because these are now not just virtual characters. You're able to actually put in real money, and this economy is just
huge.
It's monster.
Their video. I mean, it's also a sport now, which is crazy.
Well,
but
and that's something we can touch upon in another podcast, esports.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, I remember talking about this in one of my classes, but like just how much money is involved in the gaming community. It's ridiculous.
Yes.
These kids are like 13 years old and they're competing for like $14 million. Like, what?
It is a big community. It is becoming so crazy. It's scary.
One of the kids in the class was like, yeah, I was a professional gamer. And we all are like, what? Like, tell us all about it. And he's like, yeah, I used to compete for money. And I'm like, he's like, part of it's paying for my college. It's like, what?
Yeah. No, it's one of those things where I mean, I'll give you an example. My nephew, who is extremely good at video games, he used to play Call of Duty all the time. He was, he never did, but he could have been a professional gamer.
Yeah.
That's how good he is. I mean, these people you see on YouTube, that's how good he is.
Yeah. One of my friends, he was a pro Halo player, but it was the one where they were playing around like an environment, and they have to fight against other colonies to try and receive more funds, more armies, and fight each other.
Yeah.
But he was top in Europe. Actually.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's
very good.
That's crazy.
But speaking of Warcraft, I was just thinking of a South Park episode.
I know exactly what you're talking
And
about.
all those people that know South Park know exactly what I'm talking about. And that was just the first thing that I saw. That when I saw this come out, I went, oh, okay. And that's why I started laughing. Then
when Cartman asked his mom to come down.
We won't get too graphic, but yeah. But
I only wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, exactly. No, but in all honesty, though, there's a perfect example, because you have two guys in Trey Parker and Matt Stone that are billionaires because they're able to not make fun of. Well, they're able to mock to a certain extent. They're able to mock this, and it just explodes. But
to go a little off topic, I mean, look at what they're doing with Book of Mormon.
Yes, and there's a perfect example.
My parents just went and saw it, and I looked through the program. Yeah. There is like Book of Mormon ad on every other page.
Well,
and it's like, I thought they were making fun of it, but they're like, no, they're not making. I mean, they are, but at the same time, it's all true.
Yeah,
it comes all from the book.
I think that's why people love South Park so much, because they're able to poke fun of things, but also portray it accurately.
Absolutely.
So you can laugh at I know what they're talking about.
Well, I think the other thing too is it's not just like 3 adults like us; it's 4 kids that are able to just sit down. They're 8-year-olds and just foul mouth, and they just don't care. And then and you have the whole spectrum. You have the average kid in Stand. You have the big kid in Cartman, who just is racist as all can be. You have the guy who's not as fortunate as Kenny, and then you have the other one, Kyle.
Kyle.
The other one. So getting back to what we were saying, video games though, it's amazing to me how over, let's say, 30 years that they're able to try and make money. And you have, these aren't studios that are small studios. These are big studios trying to put in a lot of money for these games to make the story worthwhile. And, you know, I mean, Hitman, I'm just looking at this. Hitman came out last year. This is with, you know, Zachary Quinto. It made $81 million at the box office.
But
now, granted, it only got 8% on Rotten Tomatoes.
What was the
Yeah.
budget?
But that's the point. Like, these are huge, huge numbers. I mean, I'm going through some of these.
It's almost like you go into a movie like these, and you don't really have to worry about how your production will be, as much as the presence that video game has already created in the
You
in the
touched
community.
upon something earlier, and I want to get back to it because the fact is, they make these movies not for the critics.
No.
They make them for the fans.
And you're right.
And they
That is a good
also
point.
make them for the foreign film
Right.
markets.
And because I'm looking at some of these numbers here. Resident Evil, which, let's face it, we don't go there to see acting.
No.
Okay, we're not going there to see $296 million, okay, in 2010. 2 years later, $240 million. Silent Hill, $52 million.
Which
Need
is
for Speed,
pretty good.
$203 million.
Came out with a good actor
Prince
too.
of Persia.
Prince
what?
of Persia, $336 million. Now, you know what all those have in common? There's not one of those movies that has higher than a 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. Because they don't care about what the critics think. They are making this for
the
you,
fans.
you, and myself. Because, you know, this is what's going on. And the other thing I mean, Hitman 47 last year or 2 years ago, 8% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yes.
I mean, and I feel sorry for the critics that had to review that, but,
Yeah.
you know, and that's the other thing too, I will say. Video games have turned into almost like movies. For the simple principle of, when you look at a video game now, like Final Fantasy is a perfect example, the stories are so elaborate. When you were talking about gameplay, before you
Yeah.
just have these 3-4 buttons, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Now it is unbelievably elaborate.
Yeah.
You want stories, you want characters, you want
Background.
all these background things. And so now it's like you have these games that are spending $200, $300 million trying to make this game. And when it comes out, I mean, of course it's going to explode, but when you have something like this, it's like their heads pop off because it's so big.
And it's so realistic.
It is.
What is the game that just came out? It's like I'm not
The
very-
Division.
No, not The Division. It was.
Okay.
It came out a few months ago, but it was like the guy with his dog.
Oh,
I just remember
know.
seeing the
Fallout. Fallout 4.
Fallout. Oh my gosh! I'm watching the commercials and I'm like, is this a movie?
Well,
like
and that's
what?
the thing. The
Yeah,
graphics have
You're
gotten...
right. They are getting really good.
And-
I mean, it is like.
Grand Theft Auto 5 compared to the
Yes.
first one that came
Well,
out.
I remember 1993 with the first PlayStation.
gosh.
The
with
way
the
that they
little-
looked,
I mean,
just like it was like Pokemon looking at the difference.
Well, here's the thing.
Have you seen Madden? I
Yes.
went online and I saw a picture of the first Madden compared to the recent. I'm like, oh my goodness,
Well,
this is ridiculous.
I've been playing video games for 30 years, the better part of 30 years. And I will say, you're right, sporting games are the one game that has gotten so elaborate that, I mean...
just
you
statistics
have-
alone, you can't
Well,
win if your
moreover than
statistics
that,
doesn't
I
follow.
mean,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think. NHL, hockey game's a perfect example. You have so many different things that, you know, the puck deflects this way, or you can hit that way, and you can skate and stop on a dime, and they're so realistic now that, and I mean, we're getting into VR, you know, in a few years, but it's one of those things where it's just amazing, and they keep making money every single year. Now, obviously, you can't make a movie from sporting goods or a sports
Yeah.
video game, but they do have like Be a Pro and everything else.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can create your own character. But getting back to this, it's more of talking about stories and everything else, and I think that's the other thing. People really want to see stories. I mean, and I'll give you a perfect example. Assassin's Creed's coming out at the end of the year.
Exactly.
and look who's in it.
Michael Fassbender, the guy who's just
I
up for an
know.
Oscar.
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's funny 'cause
crazy.
I heard an interview of his, and he's not reluctant to tell everyone that he is not a fan of the game. He'd never even played it before.
Right.
He doesn't play video games. That's
No.
what he said.
But they're also probably shelling out quite a bit of
Oh,
money
yeah,
to have
absolutely.
him in it.
Yeah,
here's the
and
thing,
I'm sure he's
too.
going to do a great job too.
And here's the thing, too.
Yeah.
This is one of the most, anybody who's played it, including myself, it is one of the most bloodiest games that you will ever find in how you can dispatch of people, let's say. Because, I mean, because this is going to, I wouldn't be shocked if they've already greenlit a sequel, because the fact is, this is definitely more of a story-based game. I mean, for anybody who doesn't know about Assassin's Creed, it's basically, there's a person who goes back and they receive all these memories of this person named Enzo, and there's been like 5 games. And so basically he goes back and there's Templars in the back in the 1400s, and he goes through and he kills all of these people, but it's not like he just shoots them with a gun. No, there's a story behind it. There's a love story, there's side missions and everything else. So that will be a fascinating thing to see.
Those are those character dynamics that we're talking about.
The arc.
Yeah,
the arc is
they're
such
just-
a thing.
It's something that people really bond to in video games because they attach to those characters. They play those characters. They live vicariously through these guys.
Yes.
And now they get to see them on
become the
screen.
characters almost.
That's
yeah.
exactly it.
And now they get to see Michael Fassbender become
Yeah.
Yeah.
the
Well,
next
I
assassin.
mean,
Who wouldn't want to be Michael Fassbender?
well,
I mean,
ever since.
No,
I mean, but see,
I-
and the funny thing
I agree
is,
with
he's
you.
one of those actors that he's an A-list guy, but you just don't hear about him. He's not like a Tom Cruise or a George Clooney or a Will Smith.
I think he's just too invested
The
inside
fact
his,
is-
his work right now.
Well, that's it. The fact is, he just got nominated for an Oscar, last year. And, anybody who's seen Steve Jobs knows what I'm talking about. But it's just, he is such a good actor that I'm really curious. That movie is going to be more based on story than anything else because he's going to play the part.
yeah.
And it's going to be, okay, if this story fails, it's not going to be because of his role. It's
Yeah.
going to be because the story is lacking.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, I'm looking on this. I just can't believe they're making Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yes.
movie.
So, getting
Yeah,
back to
yeah.
Sega.
Gosh.
Getting back to Sega. We're expecting in 2018.
That's in
Sonic
quite a
the
while.
Hedgehog. Well, and here's the
I love
funny-
that game. It's like roll.
Exactly.
Well,
You're
Roll.
right. You're right.
Exactly.
It is a
Well,
good. It's fun. It's fun.
And the
It's easy
music
to
in it
learn,
was
too.
always awesome. You just
Yes.
couldn't beat rolling down the street trying to beat somebody and poppy rock music in the background reminds me of the
Oh my
Power Rangers
gosh.
song a little
Yeah.
bit
Well,
go get them. You're
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that and Mega Man. Just
Yeah.
those games, they were all
Yeah.
similar in that they were so fun and peppy and just.
Well, and that's the
the-
thing.
The bad guys at the end, they have to
Well,
fight.
the funny thing is, in all honesty, this is a game that, 88 or 89, it's not the same premise, but you have Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So, and
I
know
watched that movie yesterday.
I know
oh
it's
my
not.
gosh.
I know it's not a video game, but here's my point. And I'll let you get to your point in a minute, Shelby. Is the fact that this is one of the very first movies that has a live action with anime in it, or not anime, but animation.
Animation.
Yes.
And so you have that mixture of Christopher Lloyd and Bob Hoskins and all these guys, and then you've got this cute little fuzzy rabbit, and So go ahead and you watched
and
it.
you have a sex symbol as a cartoon,
Well,
which is almost unheard of.
Yeah.
But I love that movie, and I love how they take two different
Dynamics.
dynamics and two different it's one and only movie where they take Warner Brothers and they take Disney
and they put 'em
and
together.
They put them together.
And yep. And
And
actually,
it's I watched it, like I said, I was on TV yesterday. I was like, I haven't seen this movie in so long, and I watched it. And it's just Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse, and you're like, what in what world? Today, would that ever have happened? No.
quick
No.
backstory
No.
about that. Back in the day when this was being made, they actually was, I won't say a big brouhaha, but there was a little discrepancy because they said, well, we want to put Bugs and Mickey together, and Disney was like, well.
Yeah.
So finally, they said, okay, fine, go for it and do it because, let's face it, there are two of the biggest characters from Warner Brothers and Disney. So when you finally see them on screen, you're right. That's the only time I could think of ever doing that. It's like, wow. You have the biggest characters of the last 50 years of the same thing. You want to talk about Batman and Superman?
Yeah.
No, what a complete difference though too.
But
because
no, in
you
today's
see that movie.
right.
It's the ratings are. I mean, you have this really hot woman, and
well,
just like
today's
the dynamic in it is Disney who tries to have everything as a child,
and it's kind of an
aspect.
adult.
Well,
like you watch it now, like you
Yeah,
can watch it
yeah.
as a kid, but it's one of those things where you watch it as an adult and you're like, oh my gosh, how did I not like?
How did I not know that?
Yeah.
They were talking about these
No,
things.
but no, it's one of the. So getting back to Sonic, though, I think that's going to be very interesting to see how they incorporate your CGI character in Sonic, and the real thing, and what are they going to do for a story? Because that ought to be a fascinating look to see how they do that. And Sega, Sega came around in the early '90s. 91, 92, 93, because Nintendo was starting to, they were still putting games out, like Mega Man and Duck Hunt and all these others, but, Castlevania, but they weren't as, their popularity had fallen off a little bit. So Sega said, oh, here we go. We'll start in and come in and do that.
Yeah. I remember their gaming system, the Dreamcast.
Yeah, I had the Dreamcast. So I've had basically, and this ages me, I've had basically every single video game console you can possibly think of except the N64. Every single one of them. So I've seen video games grow up from the very bottom to what it is today.
Yeah. Well, the N64, I mean, people still play that today.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still booming.
Well,
It's still huge. I have friends that are like, hey, you want to play some Mario Kart on here? And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we in the 90s again?
Well, it's funny because we go
it's awesome.
We go to a school, COC, College of the Canyons, and you see people in the cafeteria and they bring their N64s to the cafeteria with TVs that they bring from their homes.
Well, here's
play
the funny
just all
thing.
together, yeah.
Here's the funny thing. I remember the biggest game I can remember playing back in the day was GoldenEye. And it was multiplayer, and it was you had one screen, four things, and just
the fox and
whoever could try and get the golden gun because one shot, one kill, whatever. But it was just these video games today are just and I think that's the biggest thing, and that's the moral of the story is the more money, the bigger the video game, the more money they're going to put into it.
Yeah.
And I don't think, getting back to what I was saying before, is I don't think they're making them for the critics. Because they really aren't. They're making them for the fans. And they know,
I think it depends
regardless of how good or bad it is, they're going to go see it.
I think it depends on the movie because sometimes they are actually going out for the audience themselves.
Right, no, absolutely.
Sometimes like they're thinking, okay, this is going to make a lot of money because it's such a popular game. But who are we going to have to produce this, and who do we want to put into this movie? Like in Assassin's Creed, I know there are a lot of people who want Assassin's Creed to be specifically just for the fans, and maybe the script is written that way. But Michael Fassbender, just in himself, is one of those kind of people who comes in and introduces another way of making this character look good.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's going to do his research, but it's not like he was a fan coming into it at first.
Well, you're right, and I think that there's 2 or 3 takeaways here. Number one, like I said, they're making these for the fans.
Yeah.
Number 2 is story. As we go from Super Mario Brothers back in '93 to Assassin's Creed in later on this year, the one thing that you've seen develop, especially like a Final Fantasy and something else, is all about story. And if you don't have that story, then nobody's going to care about the characters. And if nobody cares about the characters, nobody's going to go see the movie. So it doesn't matter how much money you throw at the problem. If you don't have the story, that's the other thing. Yeah. And I think the last thing to really take away here is all of these movies that are on these pages here, there's one significant thing, and that's violence. If you look at all of these games, for the majority, I won't say all, but I'll say 2/3 of these games, okay, from Hitman to Doom to Mortal Kombat to, Resident Evil to any one of these movies, Warcraft, not so much Warcraft, but Max Payne definitely. you have all these movies that are violent because they know that the crowd is going to be from like an 18 to a 35. So they are going to be the ones that are going in to see these things. It's not going to be your older crowd.
No.
Okay, mom and dad aren't going to go and see, Resident Evil. Okay, but they might let their son to, but they won't.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway is these are getting to be more violent. And that's why, you were bringing up Grand Theft Auto a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Grand Theft Auto is one of those games that's been around for 25 years. And it's been the game. Unfortunately, still have mass shootings and everything else, and they say, well, Call of Duty.
It was one of those games where you knew,
And
like, if
you
you're going to
said,
have a PS2, you wanted that game.
And it was the benchmark and saying, well, are these games really affecting people? And the answer, it's a very heated debate because it's like, well, I play this game 8 hours a day, and yet I'm not aggressive and everything else. But at the same time, are you able to turn the switch on and off? And I think that I'll be, especially, and I keep going back to Assassin's Creed here because I don't think Warcraft's going to really have the violence per se. How bloody is this going to be? Is this going to be one of those things where Ubisoft says, you know what, we're going to go all out? Because if it does, it's going to be fascinating. Because you're going to lose that PG-13 rating.
Yeah.
And, I'll give you a perfect example. Batman Superman. They had a rated R movie. They had a 3-hour rated R movie, director's cut, which will be out, in a few months and whatever else. But they would have lost a ton of revenue. So they had to dial it back.
Yes.
And I think what they're going to have to do here is dial it back. Because they know in the grand scheme of things that they'll be able to put all this stuff in the director's cut.
Mm-hmm.
And
which would eventually be something for the fans
right,
at the end.
Exactly. And
Eventually it would
those
be
aren't rated and everything else, and they can go nuts with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I will be very curious because depending on how that does, you've got Resident Evil comes out, the final chapter comes out, and that's always a bloody game.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
how is violence in video games really transcending today's pop culture? I guess is that, we're talking about video games and movies, but how is that really transcending? So let me ask you guys this. How do you think that is transcending violence in video games? How do you think that is transcended to the pop culture?
Well, in the sense that violence sells, and that like in video games you have violence to really make people excited about what's going on in those games. I think it's really it's the way to go for video games.
Even if there's no story?
No, I just think that for Max Payne, I think that's one great example of a game that has a lot of violence and gore, but you don't play the game because of the storyline. You play the game because of the gore.
I would agree with
behind
that. What do you think, Shel? How do you think how has violence today transcended pop culture? Because that is a heated topic today, and we have all these movies that are coming out, and it's one of those things where it seems to be the more violent it gets, the more popular it gets.
Well, I think it's one of the only mediums that can really get away with having that much violence. Mm-hmm. When it comes to television, you can't. It depends. Like if you're on HBO or Netflix, that's one thing.
Right. Yeah.
But still, there's still that fine line of like, I can't have all this blood and gore and everything like that. So I think in that way, it's important because it's that avenue that people can use to be violent, to be bloody and gory without having it be a horror movie or something.
Right.
Like I remember watching Silent Hill when I was a kid and like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw up.
Yeah.
But so I think in that way, it's good because it gives, the people that violence they want, if you want the violence. Not all video games are violent.
No, absolutely.
But at the same time, it gives the people what they want.
Right.
I don't think people need to go crazy and blame it for all these problems.
No, I agree.
Not at all.
People can tell the difference between a video game and real life. And if you can't, maybe you shouldn't be playing video games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
We're going to those
that's-
movies.
And I think
Yeah,
that-
exactly.
and I think that's the big thing too. I think that's where that fine line has to be.
Yeah.
Is where, where are the parents, but so you have two schools of thought.
Yeah.
One is that excessive amount of video game play leads to aggressive
Yes.
behavior, and the other school of thought is, okay, if we're having our children play these games, why aren't the parents regulating them?
Yeah.
Because anybody who's a 15-year-old kid could go walk into a Toys R Us and buy Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah,
And now, they're trying to crack down and everything else. And to me,
It's completely different. Like
yeah,
the
there has to
realms are
be
different.
a fine line, and there has to be a balance, because you can't have one without the other, and it's
Yeah.
that simple.
And now the worlds are kind of intertwining even more.
Right. And that being said, getting back to these movies, I think what you were saying is that it is pop culture, but it's also, if you can't tell the difference between sitting in front of a video game for 6-7 hours and then going out and, let's face it, trying to shoot somebody,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think.
Well,
It's
kind
not
of,
for
it
you.
plays to like watching a movie. Like, if you sit and watch Disney movies all day and you can't tell that
Well, that's it.
you're not a princess, you're not going to find your
Right.
Prince Charming, and life isn't always daisies
Yeah.
and flowers and sunshine, then maybe you should stop watching the Disney movies
No,
or
yeah. So,
whatever
I
the
mean,
case.
Exactly.
I think that I think an excessive thing is just there needs to be more regulation, and it's not one corporation's fault or the other. It's just there needs to be the balance.
But it's going to be interesting to see as these graphics get more and more real,
Yeah,
how that
absolutely.
kind of plays out. Because, you
what
know,
they
when
can do with it and how they can like mess around with it.
exactly.
Well-
yeah, and just to see, if there's gonna be that fine line of like reality, especially with virtual reality coming out, that's
Absolutely.
gonna be huge
Well, see, here's the thing.
to see how video games play out, and if that violence is gonna make even more of a difference
Yeah,
to
because
people,
then
because you're
the-
gonna be in it.
Yeah.
I've always
Yes.
said this, and I said this a few years ago. Within 5 years, you were going to have virtual reality.
Yeah.
It wasn't a matter of if; it was
Well-
a matter of when.
Well,
And now-
Samsung,
right.
I mean, now you can
we
pop your
now
phone in
have-
and be there. Like,
we
that's
now
crazy.
have virtual
I know.
reality.
I was
mean,
surprised when I went to Best Buy and I saw that.
Right.
Yeah.
We now have virtual reality, not on a main scale. Okay. The Oculus, I think, is coming out in a couple of years.
Yeah.
But the
Oculus.
thanks.
Yeah.
But the fact is that we have that coming out in a couple of years. Now, I've always pictured virtual reality, you standing on a platform like a Dance Revolution
Mm-hmm.
platform, you having it on, a little thing, microchip, clicks in, and you're in it.
Yeah.
And so that being said,
They
which-
actually, sorry, I'm sorry to
No, that's
interrupt.
okay.
Six Flags, they now
Yeah.
have a roller
yes,
coaster that come out.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you're now having
Virtual reality.
entertainment. It's not just, and that's a great segue because
Talk
it's
about
not
motion
just
sickness.
entertainment.
I
It's
know,
not just
two
about
different realms.
movies. You're having entertainment.
Combined.
You're having phones. You're having roller coasters. You're having all of this virtual reality, and cyberspace has gotten to the point where, and this isn't a bad thing to some extent, but it's gotten to the point where, and that's exactly what it is, a virtual reality.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you can't tell how many
Right.
times are you on you're texting your friend and you say LOL or
Yeah.
LMAO, because you're there.
Yeah.
It's not physically there, but it's like you're being there with your friend or
Yeah.
your girlfriend or
Exactly.
whatever.
Yeah.
But that being said, though, these movies here, it will be fascinating.
Yeah.
Because you've got Resident Evil, you've got Uncharted, which we didn't even talk about
I
Uncharted.
wanted to
Uncharted
talk
is
about that.
a movie that it's one of those things where it's a violent game.
But it's the storyline that you
But
really
it's
get
a
into.
storyline, right? And so, these companies, because they're making all this money, they're rolling the dice.
Yeah.
And they really, really are, because instead of putting out new games, they're putting it into feature films, and that is a whole different headache. So
Yeah, it's exactly, that's so true. Although with Uncharted, hopefully what we see is that the storyline doesn't get too raunchy or completely different.
No.
So in some aspects of it, they already have some experience in this.
Yeah.
But hopefully they don't go overboard.
this is going to be Gilligan's Island. Let's put it that way. So this is going to be, this isn't going to be something where you have, it's something you can take your kids to, and that's just it. But once again, they're going after the audience, and so
Yeah.
we'll see. So
One other
Yeah,
thing.
go for it.
I think it's fascinating to look at how the movie video game dynamic has changed.
Absolutely.
Where if you look on this list, I mean, it was very scarce that you had a video game before a video game before a movie.
no, absolutely.
For the first, I guess, 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
it was movie, and then they made the video game of the movie.
Right.
They still do that today, but to see it change and see all these movies coming out based off video games, that is a change in the entertainment industry
Absolutely.
as a whole.
Absolutely.
Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, we're gonna start seeing like TV shows based off of video games.
No,
which will be interesting.
There's American Idol.
Oh yeah, that's right.
No,
Yeah,
but,
on the
I
Game
mean,
Boy, but
in all
Yeah.
honesty, though. But no, you're right about that.
But also too, which is fascinating to me, is to look at how the mediums have changed.
Mm-hmm.
We went from computer video games to video game consoles specifically for
Yep.
the disc and everything, and now we have video games on your phone.
And
Like that
virtual
is
reality.
just in virtual
Yeah.
reality. It's like the progression of it is mind blowing, and how
And how
fast
quickly.
it's happening.
I know.
I mean, what? So, I think back. What? I think it's gonna be the 10th and like the 10-year anniversary of when the iPhone first came out.
Mm-hmm.
Is coming up. 2000. Is it?
Yeah, it's not this year. I think
It's next year. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and now we have virtual reality, and like everybody has a smartphone in just 10 years. That's crazy.
Well,
That's
technology,
nuts.
I think.
Yeah.
has
It's
been-
just so rapidly changing.
Yeah.
Not only that, but now they're making it more convenient for people to have those phones in general.
Yeah.
I don't want to name a company, but they're making it so that if you don't have that 6S, then
Yeah.
you'll be able to get that 6S next month.
Yeah.
Or just continuously
Right.
get
Yeah,
the newest
or
phone.
upgrade like that. Most cell phone companies are doing like year upgrades because usually the Samsung and the iPhone come out once a year.
Yeah.
Samsung's a little bit quicker, and they usually crank them out like every 6 months. But
But these mediums are
crazy.
they're just working fast
Yeah.
to try and get you the new media, the
Yeah.
new opportunities
And
as
it's
quickly as possible.
always fun to actually go back. And I mean, I know we've been jumping all around the board
Yeah.
today, but I'm looking at some of these movies. It's always fun to go back and say, oh, I remember that, I remember
Yeah.
this. And I'll tell you 2 movies that were made for the fans. Okay, really 3. Well, really 4. Okay, Double Dragon back in 1994. This got, if you want to talk about low, it got an 8% on Rotten Tomatoes. Now, you don't tell me that was made for the fans. Okay, and that only made, by the way, $2.3 million.
oh my gosh,
Okay,
Made for
you
the
have
what fans if they only got
right
9%?
Mortal Kombat Annihilation, the sequel to the Mortal Kombat game, made $51 million at the box office, but it got a 3% on Rotten Tomatoes. How you do that? I think it's 1, 2, 3% right there.
yeah.
After the first Resident Evil, Apocalypse was just
Yeah.
bad, and then they just kept going bad.
House of the Dead, we were discussing this off air.
Yeah.
Made $13 million and only got a 4% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Funny thing is, my dad and I actually like that.
And I think the worst one of them all, we'll close out with this, Alone in the Dark, made $10 million. It got a 1% on Rotten Tomatoes. Okay, we're done. All right, so. but,
never alone in that show.
yeah.
Either. They're
Yeah,
never alone.
so, but on that note, yeah, so it's been interesting to see the dynamics of how video games have changed not only the movie industry, but entertainment in general. And so what we'll do is next week, actually next week is our spring break, but we will try, and I hope, to get together and do something next week, because we're going to be going back to our basic, we're recording this a little earlier this week, but next week we will have our 4th member in Skylar. And next week, we can make a decision now. We can either do 80s films or cult films. I know that's
sounds fun to me.
Which one?
I don't know. Honestly, the cult films was one I was really excited
Yeah.
about. So
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think the choice is cult films. So next
All
week, what
right.
we'll do
Okay.
is we are going to talk about cult films. Now, these films are all going to be.
Need to get watching.
Yeah,
I know.
so-
Hey, oh, the homework.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so basically, these are movies that basically did horrible in the theaters, but you go back 25 years and go, oh, I love that movie now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Devil's
exactly.
Advocate, and so
Wet Hot American Summer.
yeah,
it's
American
a huge
Summer,
one.
and Manhunter, and all these movies But now you look today and it's like, wow, these are pretty good because, you know, it is 25 years later. Okay, so on that note, we will see you later. And thank you for listening. And I'm David Caduto along with Shelby Stewart and Aaron Lanuza. And you've been listening to a C&E podcast. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys.